Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ummāgnānatimirandasya Gyananjana-salakaya Chakshurunmīlitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Darati Svapadantikam. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yutapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrijatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. तप्त कांचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानं पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य ऋषतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदम। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Okay, Hare Krishna. So today we read the chapter 53. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmini home to Dwaraka. All the princes led by Jarasandha became very angry at Krishna's kidnapping Rukmini. Struck by the beauty of Rukmini, they had fallen from the backs of their horses and elephants, but now they began to stand up and properly arm themselves. Picking up their bows and arrows, they began to chase Krishna on their chariots, horses, and elephants. To check their progress, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty turned and faced them. Thus terrible fighting between the two belligerent groups began. The princes opposing Krishna were led by Jarasandha, and they were all very expert in fighting. They began to shoot their arrows at the soldiers of Yadu, just as a cloud splashes the face of a mountain with torrents of rain. Gathered on the face of a mountain, a cloud does not move very much, and therefore this force of rain is much more severe on a mountain than it is anywhere else. The opposing princes were determined to defeat Krishna and recapture Rukmini from his custody, and they fought with him as severely as possible. Rukmini, seated by the side of Krishna, saw arrows raining from the opposing party onto the faces of the soldiers of Yadu. In a fearful attitude, she began to look on the faces of Krishna, expressing her gratefulness that he had taken such a great risk for her sake only. Her eyes moving, she appeared to be very sorry, and Krishna could immediately understand her mind. He encouraged her with these words: "My dear Rukmini, don't worry. Please rest assured that the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty will kill all the opposing soldiers without delay." As Krishna was speaking with Rukmini, the commanders of the Yadu dynasty soldiers, headed by Lord Balaram, who is also known as Shankarshana, as well as by Gadadhara, not tolerating the defiant attitude of the opposing soldiers, began to strike their horses, elephants, and chariots with arrows. As the fighting progressed, the princes and soldiers of the enemy camp began to fall from their horses, elephants, and chariots. Within a very short time, it was seen that millions of severed heads decorated with helmets and earrings had fallen on the battlefield. The soldiers' hands were cut up along with their bows and arrows and clubs. One head was piled upon another, and one horse was piled upon another. All the infantry soldiers, as well as their camels, elephants, and asses, fell down with severed heads. When the enemy, headed by Jarasandha, found that they were gradually being defeated by the soldiers of Krishna, they thought it unwise to risk losing the battle for the sake of Shishupala. Shishupala himself should have fought to rescue Rukmini from the hands of Krishna, but when the soldiers saw that Shishupala was not competent enough to fight with Krishna, they decided not to lose their strength unnecessarily. Therefore, they ceased fighting and dispersed. Some of the princes, as a matter of etiquette, appeared before Shishupala. They saw that Shishupala was very much discouraged, like one who has lost his wife. His face appeared to be dried up, and he had lost all his energy, and all the luster of his body had disappeared. They began to address Shishupala thus: "My dear Shishupala, don't be discouraged in this way. You belong to the royal order and are the chief amongst the fighters. There is no question of distress or happiness for a person like you, because neither of these conditions is everlasting. Take courage. Don't be disappointed by this temporary reverse. After all, we are not the final actor. As puppets dance in the hands of a magician, we are all dancing by the will of the Supreme, and according to his grace only we suffer distress or enjoy happiness, which therefore balance equally in all circumstances." The whole catastrophe of the defeat was due to the envious nature of Rukmini's elder brother, Rukmi. Having seen his sister forcibly taken away by Krishna after he had planned to marry her with Shishupala, Rukmi was frustrated. So he and Shishupala, his friends and intended brother-in-law, returned to their respective homes. Rukmi, very much agitated, was determined to personally teach Krishna a lesson. He called for his own soldiers, a military phalanx consisting of several thousand elephants, horses, chariots, and infantry, and equipped with this military strength, he began to follow Krishna to Dwaraka. In order to show his prestige, Rukmi began to promise before all the returning kings: "You could not help Shishupala marry my sister Rukmini, but I cannot allow Rukmini to be taken away by Krishna. I shall teach him a lesson. Now I'm going there." He presented himself as a big commander and vowed before all the princes present: "Unless I kill Krishna in the fight and bring back my sister from his clutches, I shall no more return to my capital city, Kundina. I make this vow before you all, and you will see that I shall fulfill it." After thus vibrating all these boasting words, Rukmi immediately got on his chariot and told his chariot driver to pursue Krishna. He said, "I want to fight with him immediately. This cowherd boy has become very proud because of his tricky way of fighting with the Kshatriyas. But today I shall teach him a good lesson, because he has the impudence to kidnap my sister. I, with my sharpened arrows, shall teach him a very good lesson indeed." Thus this unintelligent man, Rukmi, ignorant of the extent of the strength and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, began to voice impudent threats. In great stupidity, he soon stood before Krishna, telling him repeatedly, "Stop for a minute and fight with me." After saying this, he drew his bow and directly shot 3 forceful arrows against Krishna's body. Then he condemned Krishna as the most abominable descendant of the Yadu dynasty and asked him to stand before him for a minute so that he could teach him a good lesson. "You are carrying away my sister just like a crow stealing clarified butter meant for use in sacrifice. You are simply proud of your military strength, but you cannot fight according to the regulative principles. You have stolen my sister. Now I shall relieve you of your false prestige. You can keep my sister under your possession only as long as I do not pinion you to the ground for good with my arrows." Lord Krishna, after hearing all these crazy words from Rukmi, immediately shot an arrow and severed the string of Rukmi's bow, making him unable to use another arrow. Rukmi immediately took another bow and shot another 5 arrows at Krishna. Being attacked for the second time by Rukmi, Krishna again severed his bowstring. Rukmi took a third bow, and Krishna again cut off its string. This time, in order to teach Rukmi a lesson, Krishna personally shot 6 arrows at him, and then he shot another 8 arrows. Thus 4 horses were killed by 4 arrows, the chariot driver was killed by another arrow, and the upper portion of Rukmi's chariot, including the flag, was chopped off with the remaining 3 arrows. Having run out of arrows, Rukmi took the assistance of swords and shields, tridents, lances, and similar other weapons used for fighting hand to hand, but Krishna immediately severed them all in the same way. Being repeatedly baffled in his attempts, Rukmi simply took his sword and ran very swiftly toward Krishna, just as a fly proceeds towards a fire. As soon as Rukmi reached Krishna, Krishna cut his weapon to pieces. This time Krishna took out his sharp sword and was about to kill him immediately. But Rukmi's sister, Rukmini, understanding that this time Krishna would not excuse her brother, fell down at the lotus feet of Krishna and in very grievous tone, trembling with great fear, began to plead with her husband. Rukmini first addressed Krishna as Yogeshvara. Yogeshvara means one who is possessed of inconceivable opulence and energy. Krishna possesses inconceivable opulence and energy, whereas Rukmini's brother had only limited military potency. Krishna is immeasurable, whereas her brother was measured in every step of his life. Therefore, Rukmi was not even comparable to an insignificant insect before the unlimited power of Krishna. She also addressed Krishna as the god of the gods. There are many powerful demigods, just as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, and Chandra. Krishna is the lord of all these gods, whereas Rukmini's brother was not only an ordinary human being, but was in fact the lowest of all because he had no understanding of Krishna. In other words, a human being who has no conception of the actual position of Krishna is the lowest in human society. Rukmini also addressed Krishna as Jagatpati, the master of the whole cosmic manifestation. In comparison, her brother was only an ordinary prince. In this way, Rukmini compared the position of Rukmi to that of Krishna and very feelingly pleaded with her husband not to kill her brother just before the auspicious time of her being united with Krishna, but to excuse him. In other words, she displayed her real position as a woman. She was happy to get Krishna as her husband, but at the moment when her marriage to another was to be performed, but she did not want it to be at the loss of her elder brother, who, after all, loved his younger sister and wanted to hand her over to one who was, according to his own calculation, a better man. While Rukmini was praying to Krishna for the life of her brother, her whole body trembled, and because of her anxiety, her face appeared to be dried up. Her throat became choked, and due to her trembling, the ornaments on her body loosened and fell, scattered on the ground. Lord Krishna immediately became compassionate and agreed not to kill the foolish Rukmi. But at the same time, he wanted to give him some light punishment. So he tied him up with piece of cloth and snipped at his mustache, beard, and hair, keeping some spots here and there. While Krishna was dealing with Rukmi in this way, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty, commanded by Balaram himself, broke the whole strength of Rukmi's army, just as an elephant in a tank discards the feeble stem of a lotus flower. In other words, as an elephant breaks the whole construction of a lotus flower while bathing in the reservoir of water, so the military strength of the Yadus broke up Rukmi's forces. Yet, when the commanders of the Yadu dynasty came back to see Krishna, they were all surprised to see the condition of Rukmi. Lord Balaram became especially compassionate for his sister-in-law, who was newly married to his brother. In order to please Rukmini, Balaram personally untied Rukmi, and in order to further please her, Balaram, as the elder brother of Krishna, spoke some words of chastisement. Krishna, your action is not at all satisfactory. He said, this is an abomination very much contrary to our family tradition. To cut someone's hair and shave his mustache and beard is almost comparable to killing him. Whatever Rukmi might have been, he is now our brother-in-law, a relative to our family, and you should not have put him in such a condition. After this, in order to pacify her, Lord Balaram said to Rukmini, you should not be sorry, because your brother has been made very odd-looking. Everyone suffers or enjoys the results of his own actions. Lord Balaram wanted to impress upon Rukmini that she should not have been sorry for the consequences suffered by her brother due to his actions. There was no need of being too affectionate toward such a brother. Lord Balaram again turned toward Krishna and said, "My dear Krishna, a relative, even though he commits such a blunder and deserves to be killed, should be excused. For when such a relative is conscious of his own faults, that consciousness itself is like death. Therefore, there is no need in killing him." He again turned toward Rukmini and informed her that the current duty of the Kshatriya in the human society is so fixed that according to the principles of fighting, one's own brother may become an enemy on the opposite side. A Kshatriya does not hesitate to kill his own brother. In other words, Lord Balaram wanted to instruct Rukmini that Rukmi and Krishna were right in not showing mercy to each other in the fighting, despite the family consideration that they happened to be brothers-in-law. In Sri Balaram continued to inform Rukmini that Kshatriyas are typical emblems of the materialistic way of life. They become puffed up. They become puffed up whenever there is a question of material accusation. Therefore, when there is a fight between two belligerent Kshatriyas on account of kingdom, land, wealth, woman, prestige, or power, they try to put another into the most abominable condition. Balaram instructed Rukmini that her affection toward her brother Rukmi, who had created enmity with so many persons, was a perverse consideration befitting an ordinary materialistic person. Her brother's character was not at all adorable, considering his treatment toward other friends, and yet Rukmini, as an ordinary woman, was so affectionate toward her. He was not fit to be her brother, and still Rukmini was lenient toward him. Besides that, Balaram continued, the consideration that a person is neutral or is one's friend or enemy is generally made by persons who are in the bodily concept of life. Such foolish persons become bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. The spirit soul is of the same pure quality in any embodiment of matter, but those who are not sufficiently intelligent see only the bodily differentiations of animals and men, literates and illiterates, rich and poor, and so on, which cover the pure spirit soul. Such differentiation, observed purely on the basis of the body, is exactly like differentiation between fires in terms of the different types of fuel they consume. Whatever the size and shape of the fuel, there is no such variety of size and shape of the fire which comes out. Similarly, in the sky there are no differences in size or shape. In this way, Balaram appeased them by his moral and ethical instruction. He stated further, this body is part of the material manifestation. The living entity or spirit soul being in contact with matter is transmigrating due to illusory enjoyment from one body to another, and that is known as material existence. This contact of the living entity with the material manifestation has neither integration nor disintegration. My dear chaste sister-in-law, the spirit soul is of course the cause of this material body as much as the sun is the cause of sunlight, eyesight, and the forms of material manifestation. The example of the sunshine and the material manifestation is very appropriate in the matter of understanding the living entity's contact with this material world. In the morning, there is sunrise, and the heat and light expand gradually throughout the whole day. The sun is the cause of all material production and shapes and forms. It is due to the sun that integration and disintegration of material elements take place. But as soon as the sun is set, the whole manifestation is no longer connected to the sun, which has passed from one place to another. When the sun passes from eastern to the western hemisphere, the result of interaction due to the sunshine in the eastern hemisphere remains, but the sunshine itself is visible again on the western hemisphere. Similarly, The living entity accepts or produces different bodies and different body relationships in a particular circumstances, but as soon as he gives up the present body and accepts another, he has nothing to do with the former body. Similarly, the living entity has nothing to do with the next body which he accepts. He is always free from the contact of this bodily contamination. Therefore, the conclusion is that the appearance and disappearance of the body have nothing to do with the living entity, as much as the waxing and waning of the moon have nothing to do with the moon. When there is waxing of the moon, we falsely think that the moon is developing, and when there is waning of the moon, we think that the moon is decreasing. Factually, the moon is as it is. It is always the same. It has nothing to do with such visible waxing and waning activities. Consciousness of material existence can be compared to sleeping and dreaming. When a man sleeps, he dreams of many non-factual happenings, and as a result of dreaming, he becomes subjected to different kinds of distresses and happiness. Similarly, when a person is in the dreaming condition of material consciousness, he suffers the effects of accepting a body and giving it up in material existence. Opposite to this material consciousness is Krishna consciousness. In other words, when a man is elevated to the platform of Krishna consciousness, he becomes free from this false conception of life. In this way, Sri Balaram instructed them in spiritual knowledge. He addressed his sister-in-law thus: "Sweet smiling Rukmini, do not be agreed by false motives caused by ignorance. Due to false notions only, one becomes unhappy. But this unhappiness is immediately removed by discussing the philosophy of actual life. Be happy on that platform only." After hearing such enlightenment, After hearing such enlightening instruction from Sri Balaram, Rukmini immediately became pacified and happy and adjusted her mental condition, which was very much afflicted by seeing the degraded position of her brother Rukmi. As far as Rukmi was concerned, neither was his promise fulfilled nor his mission successful. He had come from home with his soldiers and military phalanx to defeat Krishna and release his sister. But on the contrary, he lost all his soldiers and military strength. He was personally much degraded, and in that condition he was very sorry, but by the grace of the Lord he could continue his life to the fixed destination. Because he was a Kshatriya, he could remember his promise that he would not return to his capital city, Undina, without killing Krishna and releasing his sister, which he had failed to do. Therefore, he decided in anger to not return to his capital city, and he constructed a small cottage in the village known as Bojakata, and began to reside there for the rest of his life. After defeating all the opposing elements and forcibly carrying away Rukmini, Krishna brought her to his capital city, Dvaraka, and then married her according to the Vedic ritualistic principle. After this marriage, Krishna became the king of the Yadus at Dvaraka. On the occasion of his marriage with Rukmini, all the inhabitants were happy, and in every house there were great ceremonies. The inhabitants of Dvaraka city became so pleased that they dressed themselves with the nicest possible ornaments and garments, and they went to present gifts according to the means to the newly married couple, Krishna and Rukmini. All the houses of Yadupuri, Dvaraka, were decorated with flags, festoons, and flowers. Each and every house had an extra gate specifically prepared for this occasion, and on both sides of the gate there were big water jugs filled with water. The whole city was flavored by the burning of high-quality incense, and at night there was illumination by thousands of lamps, decorating each and every building. The entire city appeared jubilant on the occasion of Lord Krishna's marriage with Rukmini. Everywhere in the city there was profuse decoration of banana trees and betel nut trees. These two trees are considered very auspicious in happy ceremonies. At the same time, there was an assembly of many elephants, who carried the respective kings of different friendly kingdoms. It is the habit of the elephant that whenever he sees some small plants and trees, out of his sportive, frivolous nature, he uproots the trees and throws them hither and thither. The elephants assembled on this occasion also scattered the banana and betel trees. But in spite of such intoxicated action, the whole city, with the trees thrown here and there, looked very nice. The friendly kings of the Kurus and the Pandavas were represented by Dhritarashtra, the five Pandu brothers, King Drupada, King Santardana, as well as Rukmini's father, Bhishmaka. Because of Krishna's kidnapping Rukmini, there was initially some misunderstanding between the two families, but Bhishmaka, king of Vidarbha, being approached by Sri Balarama and persuaded by many saintly persons, was induced to participate in the marriage ceremony of Krishna and Rukmini. Although the incident of Krishna's kidnapping was not a very happy occurrence in the kingdom of Vidarbha, kidnapping was not an unusual affair among the Kshatriyas. Kidnapping was in fact current in almost all marriages. Anyway, King Bhishmaka was from the very beginning inclined to hand over his beautiful daughter to Krishna. In one way or another, his purpose had been served, so he was pleased to join the marriage ceremony. Even though his eldest son was degraded in the fight, it is mentioned in the Padma Purana that Maharaj Nanda and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan joined the marriage ceremony. Kings from the kingdoms of Kuru, Srinjaya, Kekaya, Vidarbha, and Kunti came to Dwaraka on this occasion with all their royal paraphernalia. The story of Rukmini's being kidnapped by Krishna was poeticized, and the professional readers recited it everywhere. All the assembled kings, and especially their daughters, were struck with wonder and became very pleased upon hearing the chivalrous activities of Krishna. In this way, all visitors, as well as the inhabitants of Dwaraka city, became joyful seeing Krishna and Rukmini together. In other words, the Supreme Lord, the maintainer of everyone, and the goddess of fortune were united, and all the people felt extremely jubilant. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 53rd chapter of Krishna. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmini home to Dwaraka. Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay, I'll read next chapter also. Hare Chapter 54. Pradyumna born to Krishna and Rukmini. It is said that Cupid, who is directly part and parcel of Lord Vasudeva, and who was formerly burned to ashes by the anger of Lord Shiva, took birth in the womb of Rukmini, begotten by Krishna. This is Kama Deva, a demigod of the heavenly planets, especially capable of inducing lusty desires. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has many grades of parts and parcels, but the quadruple expansions of Krishna, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, are direct in the Vishnu category. Kama, or the Cupid demigod, who later on took his birth in the womb of Rukmini, was also named the Pradyumna, but he cannot be the Pradyumna of the Vishnu category. He belongs to the category of Jiva Tattva. But for special power in the category of demigods, he was a part and parcel of the super prowess of Pradyumna. That is the verdict of the Goswamis. Therefore, when Cupid was burned into ashes by the anger of Lord Shiva, he merged into the body of Vasudeva. And in order to get his body again, he was begotten by Lord Krishna himself. He was directly released from his body in the womb of Rukmini and was born as the son of Krishna, celebrated by the name Pradyumna. Because he was begotten by Lord Krishna directly, his qualities were most similar to those of Krishna. There was a demon of the name Shambhara, who was destined to be killed by this Pradyumna. The Shambhara demon knew of his destiny, and as soon as he learned that Pradyumna was born, he took the shape of a woman and kidnapped the baby from the maternity home less than 10 days after his birth. The demon took him and threw him directly into the sea. But it is as it is said, whoever is protected by Krishna, no one can kill, and whoever is destined to be killed by Krishna, no one can protect. When Pradyumna was thrown into the sea, a big fish immediately swallowed him. Later on, this fish was caught by the net of a fisherman, and the fish was later on sold to the Shambhara demon. In the kitchen of the demon, there was a maid servant whose name was Mayavati. This woman had formerly been the wife of Cupid and had been called Rati. When the fish was presented to the demon Shambhara, it was taken charge of by his cook, who was to make it into a palatable fish preparation. Demons and the Rakshasas are accustomed to eat meat, fish, and similar non-vegetarian foods. Similarly, other demons like Ravana, Kamsa, and Hiranyakashipu, although born of the Brahmana and Kshatriya fathers, used to take meat and flesh without discrimination. This practice is still prevalent in India, and those who are meat and fish eaters are generally called demons and Rakshasas. Yes, there's so many of these Rakshasas. When the cook was cutting the fish, he found a nice baby within the belly of the fish, and he immediately presented him to the charge of Mayavati, who was an assistant in the kitchen affairs. This woman was surprised to see how such a nice baby could remain within the belly of a fish, and the situation perplexed her. The great sage Narada then appeared and explained to her about the birth of Pradyumna, how the baby had been taken away by Shambhara and later on thrown into the sea, and so on. In this way, the whole story was disclosed to Mayavati, who had formerly been Rati, the wife of Cupid. Mayavati knew that she had previously been the wife of Cupid. After her husband was burned into the ashes by the wrath of Lord Shiva, she was always expecting him to come back again in the material form. This woman was engaged for cooking rice and dal in the kitchen, but when she got this nice baby and understood that he was Cupid, her own husband, he naturally took charge of him and with great affection began to bathe him. Miraculously, the baby very swiftly grew up and within a very short period he became a very beautiful young man. His eyes were just like the petals of lotus flower. His arms were very long, down to the knee, and any woman who happened to see him became captivated by his bodily beauty. Mayavati could understand that her former husband, Cupid, born as Pradyumna, had grown into such a nice young man, and she also gradually became captivated and lusty. She was smiling before him with a feminine attractiveness, expressing her desire for sexual unity. He therefore inquired from her, how is it possible that first of all you were affectionate like a mother, and now you are expressing the symptoms of a lusty woman? What is the reason for such a change? On hearing this statement from Pradyumna, the woman Rati replied, my dear sir, you are the son of Lord Krishna. Before you were 10 days old, you were stolen by the Sambara demon, and later thrown in the water and swallowed up by a fish. In this way, you have come under my care. But actually, in your former life as a Cupid, I was your wife. Therefore, my manifestation of conjugal symptoms is not at all incompatible. Shambhara wanted to kill you, and he is endowed with various kinds of mystic powers. Therefore, he, before he again attempts to kill you, please kill him as soon as possible with your divine power. Since you were stolen by Shambhara, your mother, Rukmini Devi, has been in very grievous condition, like a cuckoo bird who has lost her babies. She is very affectionate toward you, and since you have been taken away from her, she has been living like a cow aggrieved over the loss of its calf. Mayavati had mystic knowledge of supernatural power. Supernatural powers are generally known as Maya, and to supersede all such supernatural power, there is another supernatural power, which is called Mahamaya. Mayavati had the knowledge of the mystic power of Mahamaya, and she delivered to Pradyumna the specific energetic power in order to defeat the mystic powers of the Shambhara demon. Thus being empowered by his wife, Pradyumna immediately went before Shambhara and challenged him to fight. Pradyumna began to address him in very strong language, so that his temper might be agitated and he would be moved to fight. At Pradyumna's words, the demon Shambhara, being insulted, felt just like a snake feels after being struck by one's leg. A serpent cannot tolerate being kicked by another animal or by a man, and he immediately bites the opponent. Shambhara felt the words of Pradyumna as if they were a kick. He immediately took his club in his hand and appeared before Pradyumna to fight. In great anger, he began to beat Pradyumna with his club, just as thunderbolt beats a mountain. The demon was also groaning and making a noise like a thundering cloud. Pradyumna protected himself with his own club, and eventually he struck the demon very severely. In this way, the fighting between Sambarasura and Pradyumna began very seriously. But Sambarasura knew the art of mystic powers and could raise himself in the sky and fight from the outer space. There is another demon of the name Maya, and Shambharasura learned many mystic powers from him. He thus raised himself high in the sky and began to throw various types of nuclear weapons at the body of Pradyumna. In order to combat the mystic powers of Shambharasura, Pradyumna remembered another mystic power known as Mahavidya, which was different from the black mystic power. The Mahavidya mystic power is based on the quality of goodness. Understanding that his enemy was formidable, Shambhara took assistance from various kinds of demonic mystic powers belonging to the Guhyakas, the Gandharvas, the Pishachas, the snakes, and the Rakshasas. But although the demon exhibited his mystic power and took shelter of supernatural strength, Pradyumna was able to counteract his strength and powers by the superior power of Mahavidya. When Shambharasura was defeated in every respect, Pradyumna then took his sharpened sword and immediately cut off the demon's head, which was decorated with a helmet and with valuable jewels. When Pradyumna thus killed the demon, all the demigods in the higher planetary systems began to shower flowers on him. Pradyumna's wife, Mayavati, could travel in outer space, and therefore they directly reached his father's capital, Dvaraka, by the airways. They passed above the palace of Lord Krishna and began to come down as cloud comes down with lightning. The inner section of a palace is known as Antahpura, private apartments. Pradyumna and Mayavati could see that there were many women there, and they sat down among them. When the woman saw Pradyumna dressed in bluish garments with very long arms, curling hair, beautiful eyes, a smiling reddish face, jewelry, and ornaments, they first of all could not recognize him as Pradyumna, a personality different from Krishna. They all felt themselves to be very much blessed by the sudden presence of Krishna, and they wanted to hide in a different corner of the palace. When the woman saw, however, that all the characteristics of Krishna were not present in the personality of Pradyumna, out of curiosity, they came back again to see him and his wife, Mayavati. All of them were conjecturing as to how he was, for he was so beautiful. Among the women was Rukmini Devi, who was equally beautiful with her lotus-like eyes. Seeing Pradyumna, she naturally remembered her own son, and milk began to flow from her breasts out of motherly affection. She then began to wonder, who is this beautiful young boy? He appears to be the most beautiful person. Who is the fortunate young woman able to give birth to this nice boy in her womb and become his mother? And who is that young woman who has accompanied him? How have they met? Remembering my own son, who was stolen even from the maternity home, I can only guess that if he is living somewhere, he might have grown by this time to be like this boy. Simply by intuition, Rukmini could understand that Pradyumna was her own lost son. She could also observe that Pradyumna resembled Lord Krishna in every respect. She was struck with wonder as to how he had acquired all the symptoms of Krishna. She therefore began to think more confidentially that the boy must be her own grown-up son, because she felt much affection for him, and as an auspicious sign, her left arm was trembling. At that very moment, Lord Krishna, along with his father and mother, Devaki and Vasudeva, appeared on the scene. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, could understand everything, yet in that situation he remained silent. However, by the desire of Lord Sri Krishna, the great sage Narada also appeared on the scene, and he began to disclose all the incidences, how Pradyumna had been stolen from the maternity home, and how he had grown up and had come there with his wife Mayavati, who formerly had been Rati, the wife of Cupid. When everyone was informed of the mysterious disappearance of Pradyumna and how he had grown up, they all became struck with wonder because they had gotten back their dead son after they were almost hopeless of his return. When they understood that it was Pradyumna who was present, they began to receive him with great delight. On the other One after another, all of them members of the family, Devaki, Vasudeva, Lord Sri Krishna, Lord Balaram, and Rukmini, and all the women of the family began to embrace both Pradyumna and his wife, Mayavati. When the news of Pradyumna's return was spread all over the city of Dwaraka, all the astonished citizens began to come with great anxiety to see the lost Pradyumna. When they began to say, "The dead son has come back, what can be more pleasing than this?" Srila Sukadeva Goswami has explained that in the beginning, all the residents of the palace, who were all mothers and stepmothers of Pradyumna, mistook him to be Krishna and were all bashful, infected by the desire of conjugal love. The explanation is that Pradyumna's personal appearance is exactly like Krishna's, and he was factually Cupid himself. There was no cause of astonishment. Therefore, when the mothers of the Pradyumna and other women mistook him in that way, it is clear from the statement that Pradyumna's bodily characteristics were so similar to Krishna's that he was mistaken to be Krishna even by his mother. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 54th chapter of Krishna, Pradyumna born to Krishna and Rukmini. Thus ends the volume 1 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vibhu. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Okay, now let's read six Astakam prayers. चेतो दर्पणमार्जनं भवमहादावाग्निर्वापनं श्रेयः कैरवचन्द्रिका वितरणं विद्यावादुजीवनम् आनन्दं बुद्धिवर्धनं प्रतिपदं पूर्णामृतस्वादनं सर्वात्मा स्नपनं परं विचयते श्रीकृष्णसङ्कीर्तनम् नाम्नामकारि बहुधानि च सर्वशक्तिस्तत्रार्पितानि अमिता स्मरणेन काला एतादृशी तव कृपा भगवन् ममापि दुर्दैवमीदृशमिह जनीननुरगा ऋणादपि सुनीचेन तरोरपि सहिष्णुना अमानीनामानदेन कीर्तनीया सदा हरि न धनं न जनं न सुन्दरीं कवितां वा जगदीश कामये मम जन्मनि जन्मनीश्वरे भवताद्भक्तिरहैतु त्वयि अयि नन्दतनुजा किङ्करं पतितां मां विषमे भवां बुधौ कृपा तव पादपङ्कजास्तिततुलिसदृशं विचिन्तया नयनं गलदश्रुधारया वदनं गद्गदा हृदया गिरा पुलकर्निशितं वपुः कदा तव नाम ग्रहणे भविष्यति युगायितं निमेषेण चक्षुषा प्रविश्यायितं शून्यायितं जगत्सर्वं गोविन्द विरहेण मे आश्लिष्य वा पादरतं पिनष्टु माम् अदर्शनान्मर्महतं करोतु वा यथा तथा वा विधातु लम्पतो मत्प्राणानातस्तु स एव नाप्रः Translation. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the hearts of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separations, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Hare Krishna, Sri Siksastakam ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Panchatattva ki jai, Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Jagat Kurushna Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hidai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.